I've had this big beery machine for almost 2 years now, so I thought it was about time to give it a proper long-term review. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and yes, that's right, it's time for a proper long-term review of the Beer Monster. There's some fantastic things about this kit, there's some less immediately brilliant things about this kit, but overall I will say that I am very happy with it, which is why I wanted to do this video in the first place. Now, in this machine today is a keg of my favouriteest beer of last year, which is this. Simply called Monkey from one of my local breweries, Blue Monkey. It is a coconut mild and it was absolutely scintillating. They did a load of bottles last year. I bought a whole case of them because I was just that much in love with it. And then it only ever saw light of day in their pubs after that point, which if you're local to one is fantastic, but unfortunately I'm not all that local to one. And yeah, it was a bit hit and miss as to when you could get it. However, when I walked into their brewery a few weeks ago and they happened to have one 5-litre mini keg of it left, I thought, I know what I've got to do, and it's got to go in this machine. So, before we kick off talking exactly about what I love and don't love about this machine, let's pour a pint. This is probably a good time though to give you a quick rundown of exactly how this machine works. So, as you can see, it's pretty sizable. I've not got a banana for that common comparison, but there you go, forearm over the top of it. It's pretty chunky. You've got to imagine, there's a 5-litre mini keg inside of that, and then there's a load of kind of, I guess, protective wall, that's not the right word, insulating wall around that with the motor bit at the back here, which powers the kind of cooling system. There's a drip tray up front, obviously, and then in the top here, you've got where your keg goes, you've got your connectors, and then you've got room for a CO2 gas canister, which really just looks like this. One of the regular kind of bike pump style. So the system itself isn't electronic. The electrics, you can probably hear the whirring as it tries to cool down now, is just for the cooling system. You put a little bit of water in the bottom, put your keg in, hook it all up, and so on. This isn't going to be a full in-depth video. I did do a setup video, although admittedly it probably wasn't that good, so watch it if you want, but I understand if you don't. But it can be a bit fiddly, but I'll go into that in a bit more detail later. Anyway, so the actual dispense mechanism is the fact that there's a gas canister in there, there's a knob on the top of here. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this. A slight hiss that lets CO2 into the canister, builds up pressure, you pull the tap and it gets dispensed. It's not that complicated, it's not that fancy, but ultimately it's how pretty much most beer lines in the world work if it's a keg anyway, if it's kind of a tap rather than a pump. So yeah, it does the business. So let us pour a quick pint. Appropriate glassware, of course, and then simply, this is the first pour out this keg, so be aware it might be a bit lively, although this beer shouldn't be overly carbonated. Taking it easy there. It's not too aggro at all. I've let this settle quite well apparently, so what we need to do then is ramp a bit of gas up into it, and as you can see, you end up easy target. With a pretty good looking pint. Now, you might notice I had to fiddle a bit with it for that. That is kind of one of the downsides, to be honest. It's not just put the keg in, pull the tap, it works by magic, or at least not with all kegs, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But you know, when you're using, I guess, the traditional 5-litre mini kegs, the ones you might get from your local craft brewer, then you've got to kind of find that right level. Some kegs, because of the amount of CO2 in the beer itself, will, for the first 2 to 5 pints sometimes, just pull. You don't have to add any gas at all. However, it's a mild, it's not very carbonated. This one needed a bit of a helping hand. And once you've got a bit of CO2 in there and it starts to kind of settle a bit, the next few pints probably won't need a lot of intervention, but it is what it is. So, cheers. It's in my moustache, I don't care. That beer is absolutely fantastic. Anyway, on to the good and bad points about this machine. So the number one perk for me is that it can use any 5-litre mini keg. That means I can go to my local brewery and put stuff in it, which is fantastic. If I'm doing a barbecue and just want some relatively cheap lager, a lot of the supermarkets sell 5-litre mini kegs of Budvar in the UK. You can go grab one of those, fantastic. Variety is key. There are much bigger, much more expensive machines, things like the Perfect Draft, that offer a more, let's call it, streamlined experience. However, you're limited to what they choose to put in their keg, which is ultimately larger producers most of the time. So you are limited a bit on choice, not with this. I would also say though, there's another type of 5-litre mini keg. I'll try and put a picture on screen now, but it's kind of, they've got, you know what I mean? They're kind of party kegs. The tap goes on the top. They've got the kind of this thick, light grey topping to them. And they have CO2 in the keg as they would with like the Perfect Draft ones. You put those in, you don't have to mess around with the CO2 canister or this little dial on the top there. You just use an adapter, plug it all together. It's seamless, super clean, super easy. So if you're into your, let's be honest, more European beers, because it does seem to be a European distinct thing, you know, any of your French stuff or even some Belgian options, they will go in there very nicely indeed. So that's also a big thumbs up. Other thing about this is the temperature control is very good, alarmingly. I've actually got that a touch too cold. So there's this dial on the front here, and it's just got up and down buttons. It'll go down as low as 2. Have I ever got it to 2 degrees? Yes, I have, but I wouldn't really recommend it. It's pretty too cold for most circumstances. It won't hit 2 in the height of summer, I will say that much. It's fighting a bit too hard, but 3 or 4 when it's 30 degrees out is perfectly doable, as long as the sun's not on it. I think I had this down to 4, and realistically I should probably have had it at about 8 degrees. There you go. It's just turned off because it's definitely at that temperature already. It's actually down to 6 at the moment, so because I've had the lid off. But yeah, otherwise temperature control is absolutely spot on. So what don't I like about it? Well, there's 2 main things really. One is I seem to have acquired a kind of consistent gas leak from the CO2 canisters. Now, that hasn't happened in this instance, actually, with me using that canister that you just heard kind of going off and on. You saw the effect it had on the beer. Has actually been in the machine for 3 or 4 months, just not being used because I've been using the kegs that don't need the canister, if that makes sense. So I seem to have solved the problem. How did I do it? I don't really know. Now, it seems to mainly be an issue actually when there's a beer keg installed, and I think what's happened is that when you push down the kind of the big stick that goes in to your into your keg, you can kind of get to a point where it feels like it's definitely all the way. There you go. You see that? There's a little bit of movement, and I think either I'm never quite pushing it down fully, or the amount of pressure built up in the keg is actually pushing it back out a bit, allowing a bit of a gas leak. I have taken all the pipes apart, reconnected them to make sure that everything is definitely not leaking, but it's hard to say. It's just a bit annoying. I know other people with them haven't had that problem, so it might just be a case of my use case, me using it wrong, or the machine, or as in my particular machine. But okay, it's annoying, but those CO2 canisters are dirt cheap, and as long as you're intending to get through that keg relatively quickly-ish, which, you know, we'll get on to talk about in a minute in terms of longevity of the beer, but yeah, I don't think it's too much of a problem. The other thing that I'm not that mad on about it is actually the cleaning process. Because it's not kind of a isolated system, you don't just put a keg in, smack the top down and it's done. You put water in the bottom of it. When you put in the kind of big spike in the traditional 5-litre mini kegs, beer tends to spill out a bit because it's under pressure, obviously. Even if you purge the keg, you're still going to get a bit of pressure built up in there, and ultimately you're sticking a spike in something that's absolutely full, so something has to give, and that's normally beer shooting out the top of the spike as you put it in. Now, wrapping just the top of the spike in some kind of kitchen roll will fix that for you in terms of stopping you getting beer up your walls. I've done that on more than one occasion. However, you know, it's just an annoyance. But the biggest thing is actually cleaning the machine because of that overspill and the fact there's water in the bottom of it, everything else. If you do forget to clean it, well, it's a bit gross, let's be honest. It's just, you need to be on top of your game if you're using the normal mini kegs with this. As soon as it's done, get it out, sanitize the inside. I would strongly recommend actually using a drop of Milton solution inside the water that's in the bottom, because obviously it has, you know, antibacterial, antimicrobial qualities or whatever they call it. But yeah, it works pretty well. time for a light refreshment. That is so good. That is unreal. How, oh, just coconut and mild. Yes, that flavour combo is just mwah. Anyway, I was mentioning about longevity of the beer. So in theory, I think they claim that you can actually store beer in these once opened up to 28 days. I'll be honest, beer has never lasted that long in my house. 28 days seems like an awfully long time to have the same beer knocking around. Keep in mind it's only 8 pints. Sure, there is someone aggressively beeping a horn outside my house and I'm going to throttle them. Apologies. So, yeah, 28 days, it seems an inordinately long time. It's only 8 pints, so I guess if you only drank 2 pints a week, which some people certainly will, then okay, you might want it to last 28 days, but a lot of us, that's not really the case. So does it last 28 days? I think it would, in terms of, I don't think the beer would be off, and I think the flavour would be okay, but I think you'd lose a lot of the conditioning. I think too much of that kind of original held CO2 in the beer would have been gone, and you would have started to get a tiny bit of oxidisation, because it doesn't matter how well you put this together, ultimately, unless it's a sealed keg unit, of course, then there is oxygen getting in at some point, even if it's just the second where you're hitting the spike in. Some oxygen will be in there. It won't be a lot, and, you know, it just, I don't know. I just don't think you can do it without any impact. And ultimately, these mini kegs only are meant to last a few weeks. This one, incidentally, is actually a couple of months old because I've been waiting for the right time. And by the time I've waited for the right time, actually, it's kind of coming up to its best before. So, but regardless, it still tastes absolutely fantastic. However, realistically, beer lasting certainly the first week, there's not a huge difference between day 1 and day 7, if done properly. After that, I think you start to see a bit of a drop off in kind of the next 3 days, even more after the next 3 days, and so on. It seems to be kind of a 3 or 4 day cycle in terms of quality drop off in this beer. Also keep in mind, if you pour 1 pint out of it and leave it for 2 weeks, it's almost certainly going to still be absolutely incredible. If you pour 7 pints out of it and leave 1 pint in there for 2 weeks, that pint is probably going to be awful. So it's all about that ratio of gas and potential oxygen versus the rest of the beer you've got in there. So something just to keep in mind. It is also probably important at this point to talk about build quality. How well are these things made? And whilst this is the beer monster, many people have said, and I've seen them, that the same kit, the same thing, is available under several different brands. Now, when this one came out, they assured us it's kind of an uprated version. It's better than everything else on the market. How true that is, I really don't know, because, well, I haven't had all of the other ones. And I've definitely seen some kind of without the temperature control and that sort of thing that look very similar. The build quality on this is good. I mean, it's cheap plastic, don't get me wrong, and this tray is, well, a bit flimsy, and on day 1 I broke one of the clips off the side of the drip tray. Does that impact anything? Absolutely not, because it doesn't really connect properly anyway. It's literally kind of pushed in and it kind of clicks in, but not properly, so it's not a big issue for me really, and it's relatively cheap, certainly compared to stuff like the Perfect Draft. So look, it's not a premium product. I don't know what they retail for right now. I'll pop it on the screen, but when I bought this, I think I paid 120 quid or something with a keg, so it was 20 quid to start with, so basically a 100 quid machine. It's not going to be groundbreaking for that, and it's not, but in terms of an experience of mini kegs, so is also worth pointing out, I don't know about anyone else, but those 5 litre mini kegs, the trad ones, like the ones that I've got in here now, I had a love-hate relationship with them. I love that you could go to a brewery and get it kind of straight off the line, straight out the fermenter, not, you know, it's not been canned or bottle conditioned or anything else. Out the fermenter, out the conditioning tank is what I meant. And that bit was fantastic, and the fact you could buy a load of it and share it easily, and everyone's drinking from the same tap, and it's kind of a pub experience, but not really. Felt like a bit of a beer festival thing, if you know what I mean. But they were never quite right in terms of they'd be too aggressive to start with, and then you're relying on kind of, well, gravity fed basically, work like a cask, hole in the top, that sort of thing. And it was good, but I don't know, I just felt it was always very consistent, and beer would definitely not last more than a day or two. This does change it up a bit, and overall the experience with those 5 litre mini kegs, yes, getting it in there, getting it set up is a bit of a faff, but after that, it is absolutely worth it. And I think that's the takeaway really for me. It's not the best machine in the world. It's not the best thing you're ever going to buy. But if you like having mini kegs and you don't want to be tied to Perfect Draft, I keep referencing the Perfect Draft, there are others, but you know what I mean. You don't want the expense and the sophistication of a Linda, which is like the proper kind of craft beer self-chilling machines. This is a really nice entry point, is what I'll say. And everyone loves a nice entry point.
That's what she said.
Anyway, yeah, it's a good place to start, and overall I have no regrets in my purchase. Do I wish it was better made? Do I wish it was easier to kind of get the kegs in? Do I think they could do something different? Yes, but it would require a lot more electronics, a lot more engineering, and a lot more expensive product as a result. I would like to see something like that available, effectively, where you can just put your 5 litre mini keg in, shut the door, maybe attach one thing to the top that's really easy to do, super clean, super simple, but then you still got the gas problem. You're going to have a separate gas bottle, something like a soda stream bottle or something like that, and all of a sudden we're getting into the world of being very complicated again. The nice thing about this is I can leave it for 3 or 4 months when I'm not interested in mini kegs for whatever reason, come back to it. It's super simple. You can pick up the CO2 canisters from pretty much anywhere, and yeah, it's just nice and easy. Right then, that is the 2-year long-term review of the Beer Monster. If there's any specific questions you'd like to know about this machine, let me know in the comments below, and I will happily do another video or just let you know in a reply. But yeah, that's it. It's a double thumbs up, this machine, to be honest. I have no regrets about it, and I use it once every 2 months on average, I'd say. Not a huge amount of use, but it's certainly something that does get, you know, it's usually enough for what it costs, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's what I've got to say about it. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already, subscribe, if you will be so kind, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.